Sex ed. Was it the funniest periods of school, or it was the most awkward and terrifying? You had the kids on one side of your spectrum that already knew about sex, whether it's from their friends, from family, from a social media, or any media really. And then you had the kids on the other side of your spectrum that knew nothing about it, couldn't tell you anything about it, and would turn bright red as soon as the topic was even brought up. Today as a society, we need to do a better job of teaching our youth about sex. The info that we give them needs to be medically accurate and delivered in a purposeful and respectful way. We cannot have this idea that kids will learn about it from their friends on their own, or that they just will not do it. As a society that prides itself on education, we need to do a better job of realizing what's important for our kids to know about sex and making sure it's taught to them the right way and in the best way for them. Today I'm going to give you 3 points that I believe need to be addressed in our society today. Now, what kid wants to ask their parents about sex? That probably is the most awkward thing that you can do as a kid, and even parents have a hard time bringing it up with their kids, whether it's answering questions, whether it's bringing it up to their kids. It's just hard for them to do. It's time we take a stand. We almost do our part in teaching our kids about sex, whether it's in schools, whether it's in the home. We all need to make sure that we're doing it. We need to make sure that every kid is taught the same thing and that they're all being taught. According to the National Conference of State Legislators, only 24 states and the District of Columbia require that public schools teach sex ed. How can we expect our youth to make a safe, educated, and smart sexual decision for themselves when whether or not they are being taught information about sex all matters on where they lived at a certain age? In the United States, only 33 states require students to receive instruction on HIV or AIDS. Only 20 states in the United States actually require that information that your students are receiving about both sex and the HIV and AIDS disease is medically accurate information. This leaves 13 states where your child could be given wrong information or not even taught at all about one of the most deadly diseases in the world, and a disease that affects so many people. How can we expect our kids to make a smart and safe decision about sex when whether or not they're being taught at all, whether they're being taught the right information, whether they're only being taught some information, will all depend on where they lived when they were 13 years old or 10 years old, however old they're being taught in that state, or if they're being taught at all. Our kids will do whatever they want. We've all heard that expression at some point in our lives, and whether you believe it or not, it's true. We as college students here at BYU or any university like to think that when we're having kids and we're married and older, that our kids will do what we tell them to do because we'll raise them that way, they'll be respectful, polite, all that stuff. And while that may be true, it's not true about everything. As a teenager myself, I'll tell you, if a kid, especially in their mid to late teens, wants to do something, they're going to do it no matter what you say, and they will find a way to do it. So why are we not making sure that they're receiving good information about sex so that they can make a great decision for themselves, make a smart decision, and make an educated decision? Everywhere you turn today in the world, kids are surrounded by sex. There's stuff like TVs, movies, music. You could go today and you could see a PG movie, and there could be something subtle in the movie that you think, okay, maybe that shouldn't be in there. And with it being constantly around us in the world today, why are we not doing a better job making sure that our kids are taught the safe and right things to do? We must make sure that when students are taught about sex, that they're being taught in a respectful way, in a purposeful way, and being taught the right information. Sometimes, as humans, we let our own experiences, our opinions, our judgments on things get in the way of our judgment and get in the way of us delivering the right information, delivering the information in the right way, stuff like that.
All right, thank you, Brett. A few days ago, Elizabeth Smart spoke at a conference on human trafficking and answered questions she's been asked for years. Why didn't she scream for help or try to escape? And now some are wondering what role her faith may have played in all of that. Fox 13's Nineveh Denha joins us in studio tonight. Nineveh.
Oh, Bob, Elizabeth Smart said she felt dirty and filthy after being raped and like a chewed up piece of gum. Smart made the comments during a speech about human trafficking at Johns Hopkins University last Wednesday.
One of the questions that is most commonly asked me is, well, why didn't you run away? Why didn't you yell? Why didn't you scream?
Elizabeth Smart was 14 years old when she was kidnapped, raped, and held captive by Brian David Mitchell. It was 2002. More than a decade later, people are still asking her questions. This is her explanation to the audience at Johns Hopkins.
I remember in school one time, I had a teacher who was talking about abstinence, and she said, imagine you're a stick of gum, and when you engage in sex, that's like getting chewed, and then if you do that lots of times, you're going to become an old piece of gum, and who's going to want you after that?
Smart's revelations triggered online comments. LDS author Joanna Brooks writes, traditional Mormon sexual purity lessons contributed to captivity. And another online article's headline, abstinence education teaches rape victims they're worthless, dirty, and filthy.
I was raised in a very religious household, one that taught that sex was something special that only happened between a husband and a wife who loved each other. And that's what I'd been raised, that's what I'd always been determined to follow, that when I got married, then and only then would I engage in sex. And so, for that first rape, I felt crushed. Who could want me now? I felt so dirty and so filthy. I understand so easily, all too well, why someone wouldn't run because of that alone.
There is an enormous amount of judgment in our society against victims of rape.
Molly Holland is the executive director of the Rape Recovery Center in Salt Lake City.
I think there is largely a cultural message still for women, even in this day, that you are responsible for being pure and taking care of yourself sexually, and I think certain religions emphasize that more than others.
And Mullen says sex education in the state can have an impact on how rape victims feel.
Personally, I would love to see this handled more in schools in a really professional and meaningful way, but I think it's been clear over the years in our state that that's something that politicians and many parents disapprove of.
Is questioning why a rape victim like Elizabeth Smart didn't run or scream, is that in itself a judgment?
Yes, it's a huge judgment, and it's not helpful.
All right, if you want to catch Elizabeth Smart's entire speech, we've got that on our website at Fox 13 now.
Now, although that video wasn't the best quality, the message behind it is still very powerful and very eye-opening, and I hope everybody looks at that. We see stuff like that in society all the time, and especially here in Utah, it's really big. If you look at what's been going on at BYU recently, that was a great example of how the actions of one or two people can affect the lives of thousands. It feels also a great example of how individuals can affect one another, and we see how just one teacher had this huge impact on the life of a girl who otherwise would have been completely normal, great, and now she has a lot of psychological issues because of it. The way she views sex has entirely changed because of the actions of one person. Now, Jenny Springler, a public relations officer, gives us 4 things we can do to properly promote a safer environment for sex education. Now, these 4 things are being responsive to feelings, making connections, compiling questions, answering them together, and most importantly, preparing ourselves for this kind of stuff. We as a society today must be more responsible for the sexual education that our youth receive. We can no longer afford to think that kids just will learn on their own or they won't do it. And if they're going to learn on their own, why would we want them to learn about anything on their own? If you're going to learn a new language, you wouldn't want to learn it by yourself with no help from anybody that speaks it or has spoken it before. If you did that, you'd probably be wrong on a lot of things. must ensure that the information that our kids are receiving in schools is both medically accurate, the same information is being taught to all students, and that the information being taught is being taught in a purposeful, respectful, you name it, anything good manner. If we do not do these things, then things will spiral downhill fast in our country. We want our kids to be safe and smart when it comes to sex. We must teach them ourselves. As I stated earlier, we are a country that prides itself on being one of the most educated countries in the world. So if we're so prideful of that, why are we going to leave out something so huge in the human existence? Thank you.